me yang to see. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me. Cause I'm weird, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me old. I feed on the fear of the devil inside, of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a soldier and I'm marching on. I am a warrior, this is my song. I am a warrior and this is my song. I bask in the glow of the rising war, lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Stew and The Nunn presents Lima Charlie. We're here with KJ. And I thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to the show. And start off by
No problem.
telling us a little bit about yourself.
My name is KJ. I did 22 years in the Army, 4 on active duty, the rest in the Army Reserve. Was in the infantry, and then in the reserve, I was a drill sergeant for that entire time. Um, Pretty rewarding job, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we're working at the VA now, full-time dad, full-time school, full-time work, so zero time to me.
So what made you choose the Army? And more importantly, what made you choose the infantry?
Well, so in my senior year of high school, I remember sitting in my the guidance counselor's office, right? I was just called up there for a meeting. Hey, you're about to graduate. Here's your options. And I remember sitting outside the office while she talked to a student, a fellow student, and overhearing like, "Hey, you did really well on your ACTs, your SATs. Your scores are great. You have opportunities, out the ass. You can go to any college you want. Blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Fuck, man, I have done terrible on everything. My GPA was a solid like 2.5. You know what I mean? It wasn't good. Actually, probably lower than that. So, I just remember sitting there thinking like there's nothing to do after high school. Like from a small town in Arkansas, and you graduate high school and you move on to a dead end job. So I've got split parents. So 3 of my 4 parents were in the military, all Army. And I just remember hearing stories about, when they were in, stepmom was in the Women's Army Corps in the 70s. My dad was in the Arkansas National Guard. My stepdad was active duty stationed up in Greenland and then Fort Chaffee in Arkansas when it used to be an active duty base. And I thought to myself, well, that might be a viable option. I might consider, maybe going in the military. And I had a friend of mine from high school that had dropped out, got his GED, and went off and joined the infantry. I remember when he came back from basic training, and he was talking it up. He's like, "Dude, it's so badass. You get to shoot machine guns and do this and do that." And I was like, "That sounds pretty rad, man." He's like, "And it's not as hard as they make it seem." I was like, "Okay." So I talked to my parents about it, and my dad and stepmom were on board. My mom, she wasn't so much. And I go take the ASVAB, do horrible on it, because I'm a terrible test taker. I really am. And go down to MEPS, and my original plan, I was gonna do a 3-year stint in the Army Reserve, and I wanted to be in the infantry. My recruiter told me, he's like, "Hey, bro, I can get you that, but like you can't be in the infantry in the reserve. There's no other way. You have to go active duty." I was like, "Well, I guess that's what I'm gonna do then." They didn't say anything about the National Guard, but they're 2 different offices, right? So, I go down to MEPS and I'm talking to the guy down there, and at this point, I'm convinced that I'm probably gonna go to active duty. And the guy's like, he's like, "Hey man, I can get you all kinds of things. MOS of choice, duty station of choice, anywhere you want to go, I can get you there, and you get a bonus if you do 3 years, $10,000." And I was like, "Sweet." And so I was like, "I want to go to Germany. I don't want to go airborne, and I want to be in the infantry." He's like, "I can get all that for you." He's like, "But wait a second, I had an email. Let me." Comes back and he's like, bro, I can get you that. But if you do another year, I can get you $17,000 bonus. I was like, fucking sign me up, bro. So I did. I signed up on my contract. I come home from MEPS, right? My parents are like, "So how did it go?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in the army," and they're like, "You're in the reserves, and you're going to go to college." I'm like, "No." So I went active duty, and they're like, "What?" I was like, "And I went infantry." They're like, "What?" I mean, I had a couple of other MOSs available to me, but like that was the one that and you know, not to knock on any other MOS, although I did plenty of that when I was active duty, but you know, when I was a kid, you go outside, you play army, right? Like we used to always joke, like nobody's outside playing supply, nobody's outside playing, Navy, right? Like I'm a battleship. No, you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, it didn't occur to me that like there are other jobs in the military and that like I can go learn a transferable skill to take with me to my civilian life. Um, but yeah, so I did my 4 years in the infantry. I was with First Infantry Division in Germany with 126 Infantry, the Blue Spaders,
Where was that out
and
of?
so we were in
Where?
Schweinfurt, Germany.
Okay.
So at the time, First ID was based out of Fort Riley, Kansas, and then our brigade, Second Brigade, was based in Germany. Um, and so yeah, 126, we were in Schweinfurt with 118 infantry. Um, so I did my entire 4 years there because see, so I was in basic training. I signed my contract May 16th, graduated high school May 19th. I shipped May 24th, and then I graduated basic training or infantry OSIT September 14th, 2001. So right after 9/11.
Right. Yeah. That's
So
as close as you can
yeah,
get.
yeah. Well, we were when it happened, when 9/11 happened, we were standing toe the line in our dress screens, right, waiting for our final inspection by the first sergeant and the drill sergeants, and it was canceled. First sergeant Pauling at the time comes over the intercom and says it's canceled. Terrorist attack in New York City. Twin Towers have been hit. My first thought was, what are the Twin Towers? I didn't know that was a thing. The World Trade Center. I'm from small town Arkansas.
Right.
So one of the drill sergeants like, I hope y'all paid attention because we're going to war. I was like, oh, great.
What
And
did I
I
get
told my
myself into?
parents, yeah. And when I told my parents I wanted to go infantry, like, relax, we haven't been to war in like 10 years, it'll be fine. But you look at American history, um, we're involved in something every 10 or so years. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah.
So you end up in Germany, Schweinfurt. I was in Heidelberg for 3 years, by the way. I
Okay.
absolutely love Germany. Would want to go back at some point.
Yeah, beautiful place.
Uh, so you go to Schweinfurt.
Well, my wife and I went back last year.
Did you?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah. So my wife and I, we got married a year ago, leap day last year. And so part of our honeymoon, we went over to London, and then we went into Germany, and we went back to Schweinfurt and a few other places, just out of nostalgia. And it really wasn't the same because of their acceptance of all these the refugees coming in. So it was a different world for sure. But
Well,
yeah, I mean,
militarily,
it was
it's
still good
pretty
to go.
different too. I mean, it's changed
Yeah.
militarily. I mean, Ramstein and that whole area is pretty much the center of the world now when it comes to Germany.
Mm,
So where when I was
mhm.
there, it was Heidelberg and Frankfurt, and well, Frankfurt was getting ready to close down. So, but okay, so you graduate basic Fort Benning, now Fort Benning again, uh,
Mhm.
and you go to Germany. Did you did you deploy from Germany, or did you have another assignment and then deploy? At what point did you do your first deployment?
So I got to my unit October 1st, 01, and then we deployed to Kosovo for peacekeeping in April of 02. So I was in my unit for 6 months.
Um,
We go to Kosovo for 6.5 months, and we're out there in the Balkan Mountains, wandering around aimlessly, doing route clearances and making sure the Serbians aren't bringing chickens into Kosovo.
Yeah,
So it was a real
I
thing.
spent I spent a year in Bosnia myself. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
all right. So you go to Kosovo.
Um,
After Kosovo, where'd you go?
mm. So we come back to Germany. We're there for 14, 15 months. So pretty much all of '03. And then 2004, on Valentine's Day, we deployed to Iraq for OIF 2.
Okay. What part of Iraq?
So we were in Samara up in the Sunni Triangle, just north of Anaconda.
Okay. And what was that first deployment? I mean, you kind of had Kosovo, right? So you had a little bit of taste. I mean, that was kind of a warm up,
Yeah.
right? For what you were going to
Yeah.
go to in Iraq. What was the atmosphere and everything like, and what was your mindset going in that that deployment?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. So when we went to Kosovo, there was a large group of us who came into the unit around the same time. We all ended up getting stop loss or stop movement. Um, and so we all ended up deploying to Iraq together. So a lot of the guys that I went to Iraq with, we had been together for years and had that deployment under our belt to Kosovo. So we understood what it was like to be away, to do a mission, to be operational, uh, in a sense. So all of 2003 was train up for the deployment to Iraq. So we're in Grafenweer, Hohenfels, Vilflicken. We're going out and doing any kind of training we can get, right? Um, and so we were fairly prepared. '03, we got a huge influx of a lot of light infantry guys, paratroopers, a lot of dudes from the 82nd. And at first, we were kind of apprehensive because we were a mechanized infantry unit, right? We had the Bradleys. We don't jump out of things, right? We don't walk anywhere. We're like, great, we're getting all these dudes who, are high strung, like to scream and yell and all that stuff. But they brought with them a lot of training that we weren't doing or didn't know to do because prior to that, you had your 11 Bravos, which was your light infantry, and your 11 Mikes, which was your baby tankers, and the two never mixed. So now we're all Bravos. We're getting all these light guys in, and they're introducing glass houses. Like prior to getting these guys there, we never trained like in a glass house, right? Where you have the outline on the ground and you do room clearing. Um, so they introduced us a lot to that stuff, and it really kind of amped up our training, and it made us more aware of like what MOUT really is. Because prior to that, we're going out into the woods in Germany, and we're doing Cold War tactics. We're chasing down Vemps and Hindies and shooting them with AT4s and just tree training is what I called it. Um, so when it came time to deploy, after all this training and with this group of guys that I've known for a few years and had a deployment with, we felt comfortable. We felt confident. We were angry, but that had a lot to do with the propaganda style intel that we were given going into that deployment. Because the first deployment to Iraq, first rotation over there, I mean, there was some contractors that were captured, beheaded, and
Hmm.
a lot of that stuff. So we were shown all this stuff and like these are the fucking people you're going up against, and so be prepared for this. And we're like, great, okay. So we have an understanding of what's going on and who we're going up against. And so that was that. We deploy. We're in Kuwait for 3 weeks for an acclimation period to the heat and all that. And then we finally roll in. But I remember sitting on the bus in Schweinfurt about to I think we flew out of Ramstein Air Base, and I remember thinking to myself, "This is it, right? We're going to do our job." Because in the infantry, you don't have a job unless you're at war, right? In Germany, we're doing a lot of area beautification, right? Picking up cigarette butts and mowing grass and shit like that, or going out and training. Occasionally, we would do gate guard. We're standing there at the low ready, and we're basically harassing people coming onto base. But it's not the true infantry job. Like our job, right, is to go out and fight the enemy, close with and destroy the enemy, right? If we're not at war, we don't have that. So I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, this is it. We're going to be tested, right? We're going to see if we are true infantrymen, right? And and so we were a little excited um, to go test our skills, but also, I mean, sure, there's there's some nerves involved, right? Because you're like, okay, I mean, I could die, but you have to accept that. So you have to come to terms with your own death, and you part of your pre-deployment process is like doing your own will. And my assets go to I had nothing. I was a what hell 20, 21 at the time. I had nothing. So you get there and it's hot and it's annoying and it's stupid. We have more training in Kuwait, uh, learning how to shoot over each other or around each other, how to move and communicate a little better.
What was your
Um,
rank at this point?
so we drive. So I'm in E4 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a specialist. And when I deployed as an RTO to my PL, my platoon leader. Um, and so I'm carrying all the radio and all that stuff. And I hated that job because I it takes you out of the fight, right? You have to be the guy in the back, like relaying information back and forth, and I hated it. It was a good, I mean, it was a good job. It was nice to have that radio in your ear and you can hear all what's going on, but takes you out of the fight. But so we drive into Iraq. It takes us 3 days, 3.5 days to get to Samara and drive in like 18 hours a day. Um, and then we get there and we're replacing it was third ID or fourth ID. I can't remember which. And these guys looked kind of good. This was like when reality kind of slapped us in the face. They looked worn out. They were wearing mixed match uniforms because they deployed into BDUs, got some DCUs, the desert uniform later on, and they just looked beat up. I mean, but these guys, I mean, they pushed into Iraq. They were sleeping in holes in the ground. They built the fobs, you know, and they were ready to leave. You could tell. And we see this and we're like, oh my God, like what are we gonna do? What are we doing here, man? Like these guys look rough. And it wouldn't be too much longer. We would look just the same. Um, but yeah, so get to Samara, do our right seat, left seat rides with the unit, going out into sector and kind of doing patrols. Nothing. It was all simple at that point. Like nothing was really going on. But those guys were they kind of stayed out of the city um, for the last probably 4 to 6 months that they were there because they were like they were on the downtrend. They wanted to come home. They wanted to be safe. They wanted to get the fuck out of there. So it was pretty simple at that point.
So
Yeah.
any patrolling, any going after high value targets, anything like that? Um,
Uh, yeah. That's all we did. Well, so not so much HVTs. Uh, although there were a few missions where we escorted some special dudes so that they could hit some HVT targets. But um, so our mission in Samara was just patrols, and our mission philosophy was the more they see us, the less they'll do. I can't say that that worked. We would spend 12 hours in sector, doing patrols, and then our ride back. And when we got hit all the time, we were in constant fights. Our first one was kind of a joke, honestly. We're doing a night patrol. It was our first night patrol on our own. The unit that we were replaced, they were gone now. We're doing company size patrols at this point, and our headquarters platoon, they're ahead of us, and we had a platoon of Abrams tanks attached to us, so we had massive firepower in the city. Well, one of the tanks runs over a landmine or an IED, whatever it was, blows track, blows off some road wheels, and so we're like, oh shit, what was that? One of the gun trucks of headquarters they just start blasting. So they have their 240s mounted to the top of their Humvees, and they just start blasting indiscriminately in all directions. Well, we're to their 6 o'clock, and it's nighttime. So all we see is tracer fire coming at us. And we're in Humvees. I am. We did have some squads dismounted, and they all hit the ground. And so we're seeing this tracer fire, and it occurs to us that like these bad guys don't have tracers, do they? We hear over the net that headquarters got hit and just started blasting. Our truck took a couple rounds. Fortunately, nobody was injured, but it was a mess. But that was kind of our introduction into like, oh shit, this is kind of real. And then shortly after that, uh, we had our first death in our company. A guy named Kreider, Dustin Kreider. It actually wasn't even combat related. We were rolling out of the fob, and we used to stop off at this test fire pit and fire some rounds. Bradley was they would the Bradley fighting vehicles would pull up, fire the 240 Charlie, and then we would dismount and go fire. Well, this guy ended up getting shot by one of the Bradleys, and just hit the ground. And so that at that point, as far as like the reality of things, is one thing to see this haggard unit that you're replacing and how worn out they look, and it's another thing to go out into Iraq and see these people. Because when we saw, people in a third world country in Kosovo, right? So that's not really, hey, you're in Iraq. But to see one of your own die, like you're like, oh, okay, so this is real. And it was a game changer for us, right? So that at that point, like our mindsets were completely changed. Like this is war, and we're going to be better at it. And 04 was an interesting time for Iraq because although ROE was a thing, rules of engagement, although that had been a thing in the military for decades, it wasn't enforced in early Iraq. Not in like I don't mean that in like a sadistic way, like we were out just spraying and praying everybody. I mean like if you saw hostile intent, engage. Right. So we learned later on, like deployments 06, 07, 08, and so on, you had to request permission to return fire. Well, we never had that. Right. And so, yeah, 04, man, it was the Wild West, it was kill or be killed. And like I said, like we had every intention of being better at war than they did. And I think we did a pretty good job. But so our mission over there was just patrolling. Samara was 250,000 people. Couple of historical um, uh, features, like buildings, monuments. The big spiral minaret, the was it called Al Mawiya, the big golden mosque that got blown up in like 2007 or 8. I think they ended up rebuilding it. Um, but yeah, just patrols, hitting targets. They say, hey, we have these homes we got to hit because we think suspected terrorist stuff happening, just things like that. But basically, it was our mission was to walk around and draw fire.
Okay. So when did you leave country at this point out of this deployment?
So
And where did
we
you go?
left. So we left Iraq on exactly a year later, Valentine's Day 2005, and we came back to Germany. Um, and then we had to. My contract was coming to an end May 24th of that year, but we all got held for 90 days post deployment. So I ended up leaving Germany May 31st, leaving active duty May 31st.
Okay. And then what made you decide to then go into the reserves after? So you'd already done your contract, you got your bonus, you now have your GI Bill, you have the ability to go to college if you want. Um, you have a little bit more, experience under just overall life experience under your belt. What were you thinking of? Hey, I want to go, into the reserves at this point.
Yeah. Combination of things. When I came home, well, when we came back to Germany, we have to go through a post deployment, where you get dental, medical, all that stuff, and they check you, make sure everything is fine. Part of that was a mental eval, air quotes. It consisted of, hey, do you have PTSD? And I don't, what is PTSD? She says, well, if you don't know what it is, you probably don't have it. But any symptoms that you do have or that you might have will subside within 8 weeks, so you're fine. I said, okay. So carried on with life, got out of the army, come back to the States. So you got to think, we went from combat zone to Germany for 90 days home with like no real military support. We were the first, pretty much like one of the first waves of our generation of combat veterans um, to leave the service, right? So like the real world had no idea what to expect, and we had no idea what to expect. Fortunately, I had an uncle who had gone to Vietnam, and we sat there and traded stories, and he told me some things, and things to look out for, things to expect. And boy, was he right. So I struggled. I left active duty, and I struggled. I say all that to say I had PTSD hit me really hard. I had separation anxiety, separation from my guys, separation from my gun, separation from you know just that lifestyle. And then I was just struggling mentally. Like I would sit. I lived up with my parents at the time, and I would sit in my recliner. Matter of fact, the movie, the Chris Kyle movie, American Sniper.
Hmm.
One of the scenes in that movie, he's sitting in a chair, screaming kids in the background. He's just staring at the TV with like war sounds going on, right? And as the camera pans around, you see what he's looking at, and the TV's not even on, right? That hit home to me because like that's exactly what I did for 12, 10, 10, 15 hours a day. I would sit in this recliner, and at the time I smoked, and I would just chain smoke 2, 3 packs a day, staring at this blank TV, like lost. And yeah, no, I just didn't know what to do with myself. I tried college. Um, at the time, it did not work. Like I didn't fit in. I didn't understand how these people could be living the life that they were living, knowing that we're over there fighting, dying, for whatever the reason may be. And so I didn't do well. And I don't know, a buddy of mine mentioned drill sergeant units. I'm like, in the reserves? He's like, yeah, like that's a real thing. I was like, no shit. So I went and talked to the recruiters nearby, and come to find out, we had a unit right next to my house. And so I interviewed with the first sergeant and signed my contract, and I was back in the army.
So you're an E5 at this point?
Yeah. No, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. So while we were in Iraq, I went to the E5 board.
Okay.
I got promotable. They laterally promoted to corporal, and then when I got back to Germany, I got my E5s, and then so I left active duty at that point. So I didn't have PLDC at the time.
Okay.
So yeah,
Did you go to PLDC stateside?
yeah. So when I went, it was called WLC. It was when the Army transitioned to this warrior culture. Yeah,
Yeah, I went to
yeah,
PLDC in Germany. So, uh,
yeah.
so you go into the reserves, and you want to go drill. And how long did it take you after you got into the reserves that they say, okay, we're going to send you to drill school? And where was that?
So at the time, so this was 2006. I come into the reserve unit. Ideally, they want to send candidates to the drill sergeant academy within 3 to 6 months. I was still struggling in my personal life. I was married at the time, and it was a shit show, and so I was struggling with that. So I ended up actually going to drill sergeant school. The reserves had a 6 month option, right? So normally drill sergeant school is 2 months long, but in the reserves you could do the 6 month option. You could do phase one and like on 2 week orders. Phase two is broken up over drill weekends, and then phase three is a 3 week order. And so I was doing that. I made it all the way to phase three. And when I go to phase three down at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, prior to me going down there, my wife and I had a big blowout, and divorce was now officially on the table. And so I go down there, and I bomb. And one of the DSLs, the sergeant leaders at the school, he's talking to me. He's like, um, and this is, let me just preface this by saying, like, my time in the military, I've had a ton of superb, great leaders who knew how to take care of soldiers. And this DSL was one of them. And he wasn't even my DSL. But he talked to me. He was like, Johnson, like you're a good dude. Like you're smart. You're witty. You catch on. I don't understand what's going on here. And I was like, he's like, anything going on in your personal life that could be affecting this. And I was like, no, I mean, not really. No, I mean, I'm probably getting a divorce when I go back. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, I mean, it's not that big of a deal though, man. It's been on the rocks for a while. He's like, no, dude, that is a huge deal. And so because of that conversation and my exit counseling from drill sergeant school for failing, I was allowed to come back. And so uh, this is one thing when I finally did become a drill and I was a drill sergeant mentor to our new candidates. I would tell them, it's like, I failed drill sergeant school the first time because I had all these personal issues going on. And I'm transparent about that. I try to be. So I go back to drill sergeant school um, May of 2008, having been in the unit for almost 2 years as a candidate, getting smoked every drill weekend, having to do PT tests all the time, just dumb shit, right? And so I go to drill sergeant school again. This time it's at Fort Knox. I do the 2 month option, and I graduate the school commandant's list. I had like an overall like 98%. So one of my DSLs at that school was like, Johnson, you did pretty good considering this is your second time through. I was like, thanks, drill sergeant.
My first duty station was Fort Knox, Kentucky. So
Yeah.
very very familiar. It's changed a lot since I was there. But all right, so now you're
Oh
a
yeah.
drill sergeant, right? And if I understand correctly, I think you did a majority of your drill time at Leavenworth, right? Did you do it at
No. Well, so
or
well, yes, okay, not Leavenworth, no, Leonard Wood.
Leonard Wood? That's what I meant. I'm
So
sorry,
at the
Leonard Wood.
yeah, yeah, and they get confused all the time because they're both right there, you know. Yeah, but so at the time, my unit belonged to Fort Sill, and so that's primarily where we worked out of. So I got my hat in September, May, June, July, till August of 2008, and then that February we mobilized to Fort Sill for a year. So that was my first time on the trail. I did 4 or 5 cycles there. I got farmed out my first cycle to work with active duty, and then the rest was with a reserve battalion out of Norman, Oklahoma, 3378 under the 95th Division. And so I did my time there. I did some more time at Fort Sill in 2010, 11, 12. 2013, we were at Fort Knox doing let's see it, LDAC and LT leadership training course for cadets. You know, for
Hmm.
people that are going to commission.
Yeah.
And then that was 13. So in 2014, I worked at. I actually took I left the left the drill sergeant community. I was on ADOS orders, operational or active duty operational support out at Fort Hunter Liggett in California, where I worked in range control, which was a super fun job. Probably one of the most fun I've ever had in the Army was out there. Then I come back to my unit and I do drill sergeant stuff, and we get reassigned to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an MP battalion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're teaching basic training, right? But these aren't infantry basic training. Well, I mean, all basic training is infantry, right? But this is not Fort, you know, this is not 11 Bravos. These are possibly tankers. These are artillery. These are probably commo guys, medical, men and women. This is across the board, probably, right?
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So we
in
we had
in
everybody.
being a combat MOS and having seen combat, how much did that play into how you approached your training with these individuals? Because in the 2 decades of war, we saw where you may be an 88 Mike and receive just as many, you know, uh, interactions or IEDs or anything as maybe an infantry battalion may, right? Or
Mhm.
you could be somebody who never leaves the fob, right? You know. So how did that play into your approach?
Oh man, 100% it did. So here's the thing. So back in 2009, when we were on the trail, um, average deployment time after completion of training was 63 days. 63 days after these kids were completing AIT, they were deploying somewhere, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever it may be. Mm. I took my job very personal. As a drill sergeant in the reserves, I volunteered to be there. Active duty, they can volunteer, but it's mostly DA select. The Department of the Army says, hey, you're going to go be a drill. I wanted to be there. This is where I wanted to be. And so I couldn't look these kids in the face knowing that, in a matter of months, they're going to be deployed to the Middle East or, wherever, Southeast Asia. Um, and be in combat. Like, yeah, a soft MOS doesn't mean a soft MOS, right? It doesn't mean you're not going to be in combat. And the great example that we always use was Jessica Lynch during the invasion of Iraq in '03. You know, you had this MOS that, we don't shoot people, we don't engage in combat, we don't need to know how to do maneuvers and tactics. We don't need to know that stuff because we're not the infantry. Iraq and Afghanistan taught us that it doesn't matter what your MOS is. Combat is the first thing that we learn when we join the military. There's a reason that when you go to basic training, regardless of your MOS, you could be a fucking trumpet player. You're still going to learn how to shoot and qualify on your M16. You're going to go to US weapons. Back then you would. You're going to learn, small unit tactics. You're going to learn how to move in a wedge. A lot of these kids would be like, but I'm going to be an 88 Mike. I'm going to be a truck driver. Why do I need to know this stuff? Because you may not always be in a truck, right? You might get attached to an infantry unit. You might get hit on the MSR and have to dismount your vehicle and move tactically in a combat scenario. And so you have to know how to do it. And I took that personal. And so I took it upon myself and my fellow drill sergeants. There was several of us who were infantry guys. We all had our CIBs from various different units and backgrounds, and we all agreed, like, yeah, man, like we owe these kids everything. And that ended up being like one of the best things for me as far as like the impact that PTSD had on me, uh, because I was able to share with them my experience and not just combat experience, but like what happens after. And I always recommended this book by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, On Killing and On Combat. Right, he wrote these two books, and it helps tremendously. But like knowing what to expect psychologically and physiologically going into combat or a high stress situation, On Combat like lays it out there. On Killing just talks about how, we teach our military to kill people. Pretty cut and dry. It's a really great book though. um so I owed it to these kids to teach them everything that I knew, so that whenever they did deploy, because they weren't going to get to their units and go straight to the field and integrate immediately and learn everything they needed to know, right?
Right.
So most of their combat training was going to come from us.
Right. Right. So, at what point did you decide that you were going to hang it up? You were done. What led you to that decision?
Um, a lot of things. Like I said, I was in the drill sergeant unit the remainder of my career, so I ended up doing a total of 22 years in. Um, I I did my last cycle up at Fort Leonard Wood in 2023, 22, 2022, and it was hard because being a drill sergeant is physically taxing, right? Like for 9 weeks, you're with these soldiers day in and day out, right? You're up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. You're not getting back until 11 o'clock at night, to midnight, and you gotta have your wind down time. You got to prep for the next day. Get your uniforms ready and make sure everything's good to go. And so you have these long days, and red phase is taxing on all drill sergeants because it's 100%, all troops, available should be present. Once you get into white phase and blue phase, they back off from that, but the training escalates, the training picks up. So more people are required to be on ranges or for ruck marches or whatever. So you're still doing these long days. And I still had that same mentality that I had in 2009. Like these troops, like they don't know if they're deploying straight away. They don't know where they're going. And at the same time, I'm still volunteering to be here. So my given day off a week was a Sunday. Because the first sergeant, he was like, everybody gets a day off a week. Here's a Sunday. I was like, okay, great, whatever. I still came in most Sundays. I was a master fitness trainer. I went to that school in the Army. And again, like I took my job personal, I took my job serious, and these troops had questions about fitness or whatever. And so on Sundays, I would come in and we would do PT together. I would teach them deadlift and ways to improve their run and whatever else. But so yeah, I spent most of my time there. But it's taxing. Like you definitely feel it at the end of the day and at the end of the week and the end of the month. So when I came home, I was there for 2 months, and It took me about 3 months to physically recover from it. Like I was in pain, like my back, my knees, everything. It just hurt. Um, so I got to really thinking hard about it, and I knew that my 20-year letter was coming soon, and I had some other physical issues going on, and I went through the VA claims process, and I got a disability rating at the same time I received my 20-year letter. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I'm just going to do that then. And it wasn't that I was tired of doing it; it's that like I physically wasn't able. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
hard to keep up with 18-year-olds when you're 40. You know?
Right. I mean, it's not only physically, but it's mentally taxing as well, right? I
Yeah,
mean, when you want to be there, but then the body is not willing, and
yeah.
then that kind of
But I
affects
also,
you mentally.
yeah. When I also had, like That's, it's the reserves, right? So, part time weekend warrior, right? But like I sacrificed a lot for my unit. Like anytime there was a mission that needed to go down, I was on it. They wouldn't even ask me anymore. They would just Johnson will go, and I would. Like I had no problems with it. Like, and I truly enjoyed it. So like in the reserves, I did probably another 4.5, 5 years of active duty and or time that counts as active duty. But like I probably did an additional like 2 years of not including drill weekends of just army stuff. Like I would go on recruitment missions. I would work with JROTC. I would work with ROTC. I did whatever put me in uniform because I loved it. I loved being in uniform. I still miss it to this day. You know what I mean?
We
But
all do.
there were other things that I wanted to do in life. There were other things that I needed to do, um, and so that's the direction I went.
Okay. We briefly talked about this before we came on, and I told you I was going to ask this. Your mindset going into your first deployment in not Kosovo, but in Iraq, and
hmm
reflecting on that. How do you view that entire that GWOT, which is what we kind of label it as, is we'll talk about GWOT. So
Yeah. So going into that deployment to Iraq in '04, um, we honestly had no idea why. No idea why. I mean, at the time, word on the street, right? What the media was telling us was weapons of mass destruction. That proved to be non-existent, right? We found no weapons of mass destruction. Well, then the definition of weapons of mass destruction was changed from nuclear capability to anything that can cause destruction on a massive scale, right? We never even found that. Like we found the worst thing we found was mortar pieces that had sarin gas, right? They were capable of launching sarin through artillery. So, but we had no idea why we were there. We were just like, okay, we're just going to go to this country. We're going to walk around in the desert, get shot at, get blown up, lose a limb, lose a life, and then come home, and that's that. We had no idea why we were there. In retrospect, in what we know now, and I'm a history major, so that kind of plays into my opinion on our involvement in Afghanistan and the Middle East. Um, we were there because of some actions during the Cold War, right? Uh, actually, was recently speaking to one of my previous professors about this, about like the Soviet Afghan War, 78 to 85, right? And like what was going on there. So the Soviets were backing uh, a communist party in the region. The US was backing the Mujahideen, right? The reason the Soviets were moving into Afghanistan is because radical Islam was on the rise in the region, and the Soviets didn't want that to happen. And the US, being the US and wanting to squash communist spread, decided to back the Mujahideen, thinking that we can control them once we put them in the power, right? So the Soviets, was it Gorbachev pulled them out in '85, and then the Mujahideen takes over, and now you've got uh, uh, Sharia law is the law of the land, and it's a whole thing. Communism isn't so much a thing there, but now you've got this radical form of Islam, and the connection to the Bin Ladens and all that stuff. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there, right? So like, I truly believe that like our involvement during the global war on terror is directly related to all that, right? I haven't done the research. I intend to. I want to write about it. That's one of the things that I intend to write about in the future. Um, but I think there's involvement there. Now I didn't get to go out to Afghanistan, so I can't speak to combat there or what life was like there for troops. But our involvement in Iraq had nothing to do with the global war on terror, right? The people we were fighting, there was a civil war between the Sunni and the Shia. There were people coming over from Saudi and Iran and Syria, and those were a lot of the people that we were killing. Um, but like, we weren't doing anything for American freedom, right? I was not defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, right? That's not what we were doing there. Like I firmly believe that. Uh, so in retrospect, like our involvement in Iraq was pointless, right? The lives that we lost there in vain. Like it was needless.
Anytime you create a vacuum, something fills the void, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's Russia going in there and us, backing the other side, or us going in later, something's always going to fill that void later. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
all right. So think about, we kind of talked about this briefly, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. What are some memories, moments, or things that you want to make sure are recorded for history, that some stories could be funny, could be, you know I hate to say traumatic, or whatever, but any kind of story that you want to make sure is documented for future.
Yeah. So like I told you before, like so a buddy of mine that I was deployed with, we did a podcast called Before I Forget. And the the basis for that was my buddy has a son. At the time he was 12 or 13, and he wanted to document the stories of our guys from when we were deployed. So our first season was just interviewing people that we deployed with about our deployment to Iraq in '04, '05 for OAF2. And part of it was because you can go to any bookstore, you can go to the Military Channel, the History Channel, you can look up other social media influencers who are military guys, former service guys, and 99% of them are former special operations, Rangers, Navy SEALs, Special Forces guys, Delta guys. You don't see a lot of MARSOC dudes doing it. Um, I think there's one that comes to mind. A guy named Benji Manabog, really great dude. We actually recorded with him. Really great dude. Super funny. Um, but you're hearing their stories, right? You're hearing the stories of these guys who went over there and they did special ops things, right? And nobody, the average population, they want to hear these stories. They want to eat these stories up because like these guys, they're the best of the best of the best, right? They're highly trained. They're the elite. They're tier one. They're tier two, whatever. Um, but when it comes to like your regular old infantry guy or your regular old 88 Mike or combat medic or commo guy, doesn't matter. Nobody gives a shit about our stories, right?
Right.
Nobody cares because who are you? You don't have a green beret. You don't have a long tab. You're not a ranger.
I don't have a t-shirt
But I'll
business.
tell you, exactly, exactly. Um, I don't have a firearms tactics, training school, that I do on the side, right? But we still did some really incredible stuff, right? There's a reason why a lot of Medal of Honor recipients are just regular dudes,
Right.
right? Audie Murphy, one of the most famous Medal of Honor recipients, was just a regular old infantry guy. Um, Ross McGinnis from the 126 Infantry in 2006, regular old infantry guy who jumped on a grenade and saved his friends,
Right.
right? Um, Salvador Junta, right over in he was the 173rd Airborne in Korengal Valley in Afghanistan, 2008. Regular infantry guy, right? It's just regular dudes doing irregular stuff, and they have a great story to tell. Now, it just so happens that for a lot of these guys with these high awards, silver stars and medals of honor, they had somebody write a really great citation. And that's amazing that those stories are being told. But for guys like you and me, I mean, maybe we didn't do anything that is deserving of a silver star or distinguished flying cross, but like we still did some pretty cool stuff. I
Right.
do have a V device on an Arcom. So I was awarded the with Valor, which is where my username on Instagram came from. Um, for something that I did in Iraq. And I've always thought that was really cool, but I never really understood the gravity of it until this recent debacle about Tim Kennedy came out and
Right.
his whatever. But that was the reason behind starting before I forget, and that's the same reason why you're doing what you're doing here is that we have stories, right?
Right.
And those stories need to be told too. So back to your question, right? Like, what is something that needs to be told? I think about that all the time, honestly, because I now have a son. He's 4.5 months old, and I don't know at what point in his life I will ever tell him about my service and things that I did. Not that I'm not proud of it. It's just, when is the right time to tell a young mind that their dad went to war and you know killed people, right?
Right.
Um, but I'll tell you, one of the greatest things I ever saw in service while deployed, right? Um, and this is a huge shout out to our medic and all combat medics. Doc Skillen, right? The day that Kreider died, like without hesitation, Doc, who was probably 20, 30 meters away, saw it happen, launched his M16, grabbed his aid bag, which was strapped to him, and sprinted over to this guy and did everything he could to 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 keep Kreider alive. Kreider took a 7.62 round through the back of his head, out of his face. So he was dead. There was no saving that, right?
Right.
But Doc is over there on his hands and knees, trying to hold his head together, trying to do whatever he could to bring this guy back to life. And to me, that is such a powerful moment. That's how when we knew, like, oh man, this Doc is great. But after seeing this, man, Doc is a fucking angel, right? And that is like forever etched in my memory. It's because it's just really it's just I don't know. That's a story that I hope lives forever. And actually, I want to
I'm sure
say
they gave. I'm
today
sure
is
they
Doc's
gave
birthday.
you and the others in the unit. I mean, utmost confidence that if something happens to you, he's right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it absolutely did. I mean, Doc he was a medic first, but like when we were on patrols, I mean, he acted like a normal infantry guy. He would do all the things we did, but like when it came time to put the gun down and pick up the aid bag, like no hesitation.
Right.
Um, that was definitely one of the coolest things that I ever saw. Uh, this, and he would have done that under fire, complete lack of regard for himself, uh, to do what he had to do to ensure that his guys are taken care of. And like I said, today's Doc's birthday is 44. So um, happy birthday, Doc Skillen. But I don't know, man. Um, as far as like stories to tell in the infantry, we have plenty. We try not to tell too many of them though, because we don't want people to think otherwise of us. You know?
Right. Well, again, I mean, it's the stories I'm looking for are the ones you want your kids to know, right? I'm not looking for you know blood and guts all the time, right? But
Yeah.
just the funny stories. I mean, we've all had those funny things happen. You're sitting around, you get that little bit of rare downtime. Something funny happens, or just something important happens, like the doc, story. So
Yeah.
and again, that's what we want to capture, right? We're not looking for door kicking and canoe,
Yeah.
skulls made out of canoe into canoes. So, um, yeah. So, have you had any of your your prior students come back and visit you, uh, post maybe a deployment and talk to you about that.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a few. I had one of my former soldiers, his mom, contact me on Facebook. Uh, he was a combat medic with the 101st, and he had gotten hit. And she contacted me to let me know that he got hit. He's fine. But like one of his guys got shot, and he runs over there doing what a medic does, right? And he reaches back to grab his aid bag, took an RPG, right? Fortunately, the RPG, as far as I remember, wasn't primed, so it didn't detonate, but it still hit him, took out his arm. And it was really cool for her mom, for him, I'm sorry, for his mom to reach out to me because, you know, from what she says, he talked about me a lot, and when I met his parents at their graduation, like she came up to me and she was very thankful. And that was one of the cool things about being a drill sergeant, man, is talking to the parents at the end, right? Like, I didn't even recognize my child. Like I've seen parents, you hear the stories. I've seen parents walk past their kid, not even recognizing them. I mean, they're in a dress uniform, but like usually their posture is different. The way they present themselves is different. The confidence that they carry is different. Um, and that was part of the rewarding side of it. He's like, you train them from civilian to soldier. At about week 3, week 4, their army light bulbs come on, and they start getting in line with what's being taught. And it really is like you see them walk across that stage or that parade field a completely different person than who they were 2 months ago,
Right.
and it's incredible. Um, I've had other soldiers reach out and say, this they're out of the military at this point, and like, hey, Jules, I just wanted to let you know that, like, I did my time. I still think about some of the things you said. Some of them have specific quotes that they are reminded of constantly, things that I said to them that they still use in their day to day. And it's a really cool feeling, man. Like to know that you had an impact on these people's lives and that it helped them through not only their military career, but they're still using it in their civilian life as well.
I
So,
We've been going for a minute, but I want to touch on one more subject. Uh, you are in that generation of social media and the military, especially with your Instagram account and stuff like that. What is that like? Because when I was in, the Instagram wasn't around, right? So I mean,
mhm.
that's kind of a different. I mean, I've seen pictures of you in uniform and stuff like that. Did you have former soldiers find you through that, or it would that's a kind of a different space, in my opinion.
It is. It's a dangerous space, especially in the trade-off world. Um, yeah, so probably 10 years ago, I tried to grow my social media account because I wanted to transition it to a business account because I was going to do, like what you had mentioned earlier, start a t-shirt company. And yeah, at the time, there weren't too many out there, but so I was trying to grow my account to over 10,000. I was going to transition to a business account. So in doing that, I had to keep my account public and I had to post constantly. And it's so it's it's exhausting to have to sit there and do that. Like I couldn't keep up with it. And I didn't want to because you got to engage with your followers and make sure to be posting quality content so people can see that and be like, oh yeah, this guy's legit, blah blah blah. You get to noticing like what posts do well, which ones don't. Like ones in uniform with the campaign hat, they do great. Ones at the gym, I'm not a fitness influencer, like nobody cares. So you got to figure out your niche and then kind of go with it. But when you're in the trade-off world and you've got these trainees and they get their phones on the weekends, on Sunday for 30 minutes, they're supposed to stay off social media, but they don't, doesn't mean they do, or they graduate. So yeah, I've had quite a few of my trainees uh, follow me on social media after training, and that's just something that happens. But your engagement with them at that point is what matters, right? Keep it professional. If they want to talk to you about stuff, then you talk to them about stuff, whatever. It's just how it goes. But it is a different world. It's very interesting, and it can be navigated. It's just how you do it, I guess. But I gave up on the whole like trying to sort of like be a bro vet fucking influencer whatever because it's not my personality.
Right.
Um, I am in the process of trying to start a business. So if you notice, like my Instagram name has changed from with underscore valor underscore to WV underscore OKBC.
Mhm.
That's what this is. So I'm trying to start a beard company, right? A beard oil company, and so that's actually my workstation I'm sitting next to. Um, it used to be when I did the podcast, I had a whole a space set up for that, but having a kid, that takes up a lot of
Sure.
space, and so now I'm in the garage. But yeah, the social media world is a different world altogether. And I'll tell you, man, like with a lot of the stuff that we see posted on like US Army, WTF, and Not in Rags, these Instagram pages, um, social media and the need for these young kids to be some type of influencer is getting in the way of their ability to serve effectively. I mean, I fully agree with that. It's interesting to see that the army is utilizing social media influencers to pick up recruitment, especially since the army has failed at recruitment year after year. Um, like everyone knows what's her name, Luhan, the psyop girl,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But there are other ones out there. There are other ones out there who like the army fully endorses to do influencing stuff. And it's a weird space and it's a slippery slope because you start promoting this type of stuff and like the things that they post, right? And some of them are being very respectful in uniform, but then you get other ones out there that are just embarrassing themselves, embarrassing the uniform, looking completely out of regulation, looking like garbage, and they're making the general population believe that we are a weaker force. And based on my experience on the trail in 2022 with those kids, I mean, I had a 17-year-old all the way up to a 49-year-old. He turned 50 while we were there. He was prior service, but the army's not getting weaker. Drill sergeants, we're not getting weaker. Like how we were in that cycle was exactly how I was as a drill sergeant in 2009, and it reminded me of how my drill sergeants were to me in 2001. So the Army's not getting weaker in that aspect. We're just allowing more ridiculous stuff to happen.
Right.
And I just, it's a weird space, and like I said, it's a slippery slope. And if they're not careful, it could be damning in the long run.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to cover?
Uh, I mean, nothing that really comes to mind. No, just
All right.
yeah.
All right. Hang on. I'll play the exit and I'll catch you on the backside.